Into this, the first question is for Brother Imad. Can you elaborate on what you meant by religious knowledge not being conclusive?
Okay, say it again.
Can you elaborate on what you meant by religious knowledge not being conclusive?
See, when you're talking about conclusive means certain. You know, certain knowledge, some knowledge that comes from science is certain. Some knowledge that comes from science is uncertain, even though it may be more likely or most likely, but it may not be certain. So when we're talking about conclusive, means it is certain. And the same thing in Islam, there's certain knowledge that is conclusive, that is certain. In other words, it is first authentic, and then second, it has a clear meaning. For example, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. No, there is no God but Allah. Allah was رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Allah was pleased with them. So this is something that is authentic and can only be explained in one way. But some knowledge can be uncertain, what I called unconclusive. Uncertain in Islam means either the text is not authentic, like a hadith is weak or even fabricated, you know, or it may be authentic but can be explained in multiple ways, in which case you cannot take one particular meaning and use it as the absolute meaning. So that's what I said. And the same thing with science. Some science can be certain or conclusive, like the physical laws, like the scientific fact, but much of it actually is not conclusive, and I'm not dismissing it, by the way, but it's still more likely in science. In other words, it is not certain. And what I said, that which is certain in science and that which is certain in Islam, there's absolutely no contradiction. But the contradiction happens when one or both are uncertain. And it is really important to categorize the knowledge properly so as not to be confused or disappointed.
Jazakallah khair. The next question for Sheikh Yaser. Considering that we have human findings that were discovered 20,000 years ago, what is the Islamic position on evolution, and how can we respond to non-Muslims when they ask us this question?
Seriously? Okay, if you want to read more about the subject of Islam and evolution, I suggest you go online and watch Sheikh Yaser Qadi's videos on the subject of Islam and evolution. He mentioned that in details. I don't want to keep repeating the same thing over here. As a matter of fact, when it comes to evolution, as Muslims, we don't completely deny the theory of evolution altogether. It's a complex issue. So it's not everything that is considered acceptable, and not everything we reject altogether. So it depends on which area we're talking about. So that's something for details. Go to Sheikh Yaser Qadi's actually writings and also his videos on YouTube, inshallah ta'ala.
Well, one thing I would like to add in here, you know, here evolution, by the way, at the best, I said it remains a theory. Because first of all, keep in mind that evolution is a time process that supposedly takes millions of years. And it has not been observed. So nobody has observed evolution in action. All we're doing is that we're observing certain present things, fossils or whatever, and we try to reconstruct a model. So imagine you have a big piece of art, you have points in there, and you're reconstructing the model. So as such, there will be elements, there will be errors introduced in the process. And that's the way it is. And I think even if it did happen, the theory that we have is not certain, because like I said, it has not been verified. It has not been verified. And I can tell you scientifically, it does not seem to have happened. You know what Sheikh Yaser said, Islam does not have a problem with it. Islam has a problem with the creation of Adam, as he stated. But as far as the others are concerned, if you can prove it scientifically, Islam does not say it did not happen. Now, but however, looking at the present Darwinian model, it does not seem to be correct what happened. So in other words, I can tell you scientifically it did not happen. Or you tell me what happens then, I tell you I don't know. I don't know what happens, but I know what did not happen. But like I said, the problem actually with the scientific, with the problem of evolution is that the discussion gets loaded. It's not the theory itself, it's the implications of the theory, of what is connected to it. That's why people tend to be overzealous when defending it or when rejecting it. So automatically, if you're defending it, you're categorized as a creationist, as religiously motivated. Or if you're defending it, you're automatically categorized as an atheist. And sometimes it is not the case. I think it is good to discuss it actually from a scientific perspective without getting into detail. There's one book that I would recommend, actually. It's a little old, by an Australian scientist called Evolution, A Theory in Crisis, by Michael Denton. I think it was published in 1986, but I think much of his arguments remain really, really valid in the process. And just not to advertise, but I wrote a book called Belief in the Human Mind, where I get actually into detailed analysis and discussion of that theory as well.
Jazakallah khair. The next question, for someone who is leading certain projects on their campus at their university and they're striving to be a perfect leader, they want to know if you have any suggestions of books or where they could go to learn this good character and how to implement it into their position that they're in.
Okay, so the subject of character, honestly, there's no one book will teach you how to behave well. It's a companionship of someone with good behavior and good akhlaq and good manners. These people once were called mentors. We lack them, unfortunately, these days. The way we live in our lifestyle, we have transferred our emotional fulfillment when it comes to the companionship with a mentor and teachers and leaders and so on, so from the physical world to the virtual world. So a lot of us are satisfied with our online following of certain speakers, certain, you call them mentors, teachers, and you subscribe to their channels and so forth. And as a result, you think that you're fulfilled when you listen to them. Oh, mashallah, this is awesome, this is beautiful, which is true. It's good, it's beautiful, it's beneficial. But when it comes to learning how to behave, learning how to hold on to a high standard of character requires a lot of companionship, a long companionship, I would say. And usually when we say a long companionship, that means you require to be around somebody who's local to you. Many people, they always focus on celebrity names to find them as their role model, to follow them, when your best local resource can be the imam that is completely obscure, no one knows about him, or that sister Masha who teaches in the halaqah maybe on this day or that day in the masjid. It could be the right person for you. Look for these low-key mentors who will be the best, inshallah ta'ala, for you. Learn from them through companionship, and it requires a lot of patience, obviously, and hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, with persistence, you will get there, bidnillahi azza wa jal. It's a process, but you're going to have to start somewhere, inshallah.
Okay, the next question is, how can we, for our youth that are striving for a career path in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, what can we do to empower them to revive contributions in these fields?
Well, first of all, there's a beautiful hadith, and all the hadith are beautiful, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ma anzal Allahu min da'in illa anzal lahu shifa." That whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down a sickness, He sends with it a cure. And He says, "Alimahu man alimahu wa jahilahu man jahila." Some people may know it, some people may not know it. See, this hadith can be strongly motivating, because why? Because here the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that for every sickness, there's a cure. In other words, when you're trying to look for a cure, you're looking for something that exists. I'm not trying to say, well, maybe we'll find, maybe we'll. No, the Prophet is saying to you that it exists. And I think in here, what I mentioned earlier, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismi Rabbika, when that is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this gives you a motivation. In other words, my pursuit of knowledge can earn me reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we want to be at the top. In other words, we don't want just mediocre Muslim scientists. We want the best scientists, and I can tell you, we have great scientists, but sometimes they're not visible in our communities. People that have contributed actually largely, we're no less than anybody else. Actually, if you have the proper motivation, you'll be better than everybody else, because your goal actually is much more noble than somebody whose goal is just to achieve prominence in a certain field. My goal is beyond that, is to achieve prominence for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what the earlier scientists did. By the way, they were not of a different nature than we are. In order to say, for example, now, well, back those great scholars, well, they were not different human beings. Human being has not evolved since then, so to speak. We're still of the same nature, but sometimes our goal, our environment has changed. And by some adjustment, inshallah, we can achieve something no less than what they did. Yes.
Actually, I want to add something else here, because subhanAllah, the Muslim community has been working on creating multiple individual success stories. So when you look at Muslim scientists, let's say in America, you find individual names. What we lack in as a community is collaboration, which is not just the individual success story, it's the overall success story in a certain field. So for example, alhamdulillah, how many Muslim doctors we have in America? We have hundreds, maybe thousands. But how many Muslim hospitals we have? Meaning hospital that is actually designed by your Muslim colleagues got together to double their effort in certain community. Obviously we have a lot of Jewish hospitals, a lot of Christian hospitals of different denominations and so on. I'm not saying for the Muslims right to go there and start business and have their own hospital and so on. I'm not saying this. Just giving the example, we're still working on ourselves as individual success stories. This person wants to be the successful lawyer, this wants to be the successful artist, successful doctor, this and that, but we're not thinking in a collective way. The collective mind is still missing there, and this is something we need to work on as a great contribution, inshallah ta'ala, for the future as well. I know.
This question is coming from a parent. They're wondering how they can motivate or help their children to find their talents and their potential.
Wallahi, trying sometimes. This is something, by the way, it's a process, it's a discovery process to find basically what you like, and you can help sometimes, asking some basic questions, what you like, what you don't like, where your heart is, but sometimes it requires some courage into looking sometimes in some odd places. So we don't all have to be doctors and engineers, which is, unfortunately, that's what we are. It is good to look elsewhere. When I tell people that I'm an entomologist by profession, it's like I'm coming from a different planet, where do you come from, and it's good to get into the humanities, there are certain things, in other words, when we're looking to find our niche, what we like, to make all options open. Arts and everything, we want people that get into the different fields, and it's a discovery process, by the way. Sometimes you learn certain things about you, sometimes you change, by the way. You may like certain things, but you may change later on. So I don't have a magical formula for that. It's just basically you have to be in a way audacious enough, so to speak, to look into different options, and open enough actually to consider all the other options.
The last question, if either of the speakers have any good books that discuss scientific concepts and its correlation with Islam, Quran, or Hadith.
Scientific?
In English?
Yeah, obviously in English. Wallahi, in Arabic I know few, in English, I'm not much familiar with Islamically in particular. I mean, I mentioned the book that I wrote actually with that purpose, that talks about basically the relationship of the human mind into doubt and atheism, and then science. And in the process, basically, I did not find something specifically actually written by Muslims in that regard. That's why a small contribution. But I mean, if anybody has anything to add, that would be really great.
Honestly, I'm sure there is, but my suggestion for you to go to the bazaar before it closes and ask the bookstores over there, inshallah ta'ala. They'll give you the best list of books, inshallah ta'ala.
That's a good thing.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Yaser, with the perfect transition to ending this session. I want to remind you all